All righty, Dan, we are live.
Yes, we are.
What an evening. We have, of course, breaking news. In the world of college football, as we've come to know over the last couple Julys, it's been a hotbed for news. We've got more. It is the end of July, the year of our Lord 2023. News has just broken that Colorado is, in fact, ending months of speculation.
Alleged. Yeah.
Reportedly, they're headed back to the Big 12, leaving the Pac-12, going back to the Big 12, Dan, reported by a number of sources from Pete Thamel at ESPN to most recently our friend Brett McMurphy at Action Network, who seemingly confirmed that it is a go. So this has been boiling up for a while. Kind of in the undercurrent here is that the Pac-12 is working on a new media rights deal. We thought we were going to get that in March and then April and then May and then June. And then they punted and said, we're going to get to it eventually.
At Media Day.
At Media Day.
Slyavkov said, we want to keep the focus on football. And, the longer we've waited, then, more suitors have come into the fold. And Colorado, upon hearing that, apparently, maybe just coincidentally, Ty, what'd they do?
They decided to leave. Yeah, it sounds like they got tired of waiting around, frankly. Yeah. And who knows what this means for the future of the Pac-12. I think we can speculate a little bit what it means for the future of the Big 12 and what their strategy is going to be. But look, you're the Pac-12 guy between the two of us. You graduated from a Pac-12 school. I'm assuming a Pac-12 school that will be very interested in the news that one of their own is deciding to leave an already slimmed down conference in 2024. It was going down to 10 teams with USC and UCLA going to the Big 10. Now, I guess we've got a Pac-9 with potentially more to come. How do you feel right now?
I feel nothing, Ty. I feel nothing. How do I feel? I feel like this is, as you mentioned, a long time coming. It's just an extension of what we've come to know about the sport, that a conference like the Big 12, after suffering losses, is looking out for the good of the Big 12. I suppose on a certain level they should, right? That they are trying to grow in the way that obviously the Pac-12 used to grow. The Big 10 has grown. The SEC has grown. The ACC has grown. That you want to grow westward, specifically for the Big 12, because of a television footprint and time zones. So now they have more in the Mountain Time Zone along with BYU. And so from a strategic standpoint, a school like Colorado, near the Denver market, it's Boulder, it's near Denver, like an hour away or so. I don't have my exact geography down. But I don't think Brett Yormark was going to go after anybody less than a sitting Power 5 program at this point. So not an SMU, not a San Diego State, which have been rumored to be in conversations with the Pac-12. So for the Big 12, they get a team that has largely been a doormat for the Pac-12 for a considerable amount of time. Colorado had a flash in, I want to say, 2016. Shout out Sefo Lufau, I believe. Like McIntyre. You go back to around 2001. I think they made the Big 12 championship game, throttling a Nebraska team that still ended up in the national championship game, if I have my year correctly. But by and large, they have served to occasionally upset a big team, have a good season and a half-ish. They had a few good games in 2020, but this has not been a program that has affected conversation in any sort of meaningful, competitive way in the sport beyond what they are continuing from what USC and UCLA did last summer, now what they are reportedly doing and going to the Big 12 this summer. So is it another swing of the hammer and the nail that is being pushed into the coffin of the Pac-12 10? Yeah, probably. But the health of this conference was never going to fully depend on Colorado anchoring it. It was merely a number that you want to have double-digit teams in a major conference, and Colorado helped to achieve that. But it seems now the Pac-9 moving forward, unless they can add San Diego State, which just got trickier with the heightened buyout in the Mountain West, that the Pac-12 is either going to be shopping or collapsing and figuring out what to do, or the teams left, those 9 teams. So it's the Washington schools, the Oregon schools, the Bay Area schools, the Arizona schools, and Utah they're going to be figuring out what's best for their future, both competitively and financially.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about this scenario now for months on end,
Yeah.
and it really has been a war of dueling PR departments.
Mm-hmm.
On one hand, you've got a lot of the CBS reporting that was very friendly to the Big 12,
Of
and we
course.
joked on our show, please subscribe, by the way, to the Solid Verbal, that it was being fed directly to them from Brett Yormark himself. On the other side of the coin, you had some favorable language towards the Pac-12. No, the media rights stuff is going to work
Right.
itself out. You just got to give it time, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Relax. Everything's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. Shh,
Right.
shh, shh. It's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
And what I think the irony is right now, given the news of the evening, Colorado, which as you said rightfully has been a doormat over the last however many years
Yep.
in the Pac-12, they're now the ones that are impacting change in a really, really significant way in 2023. We saw it was USC, UCLA last year, also in like late June, early July.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, we've got this news about Colorado, and I think there will be a domino effect. You mentioned going down to the Pac-9.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, how long is that going to last? Because alongside Colorado in many of these rumored moves on conference realignment, we had Arizona, we had Arizona State, we had Utah.
Right.
The corner schools, the so-called corner schools, potentially also moving over to the Big 12. It would not be a surprise to me if you find out that that's another domino to fall. I think in time, it wouldn't be surprising to anybody to find out that schools like Oregon and Washington, now the presumed big name brands, if you want to call them that,
Mm-hmm.
in what remains of the conference, would look to go elsewhere, potentially go to the Big Ten. That's been the rumor. So I think this is kind of the next big domino to fall. We didn't know which team it would be, which program it would be. Colorado acting in their own self-interest. As reported by Brett McMurphy, they stand to make about $31.7
Yeah.
million.
An equal share. Yeah.
Yeah, they'll get the equal share when the new grant of rights starts with ESPN and Fox in 2025. In 2024, they also get the full share,
Mm-hmm.
and they get an estimated $42 million. So
Yeah.
obviously money is a pretty big driver for this, but I think if you're Colorado, I think if you're any of the Pac-12 schools at this point looking out at what the college football landscape looks like, everybody craves the money, but what folks I think crave more is stability.
Yeah.
And the money gives you that, but obviously you don't want to be in a conference that's on the verge of collapse. And love it or hate it, it feels like that's where we're at with the Pac-12 right now.
Yeah, oh, it absolutely does. And the story here is the Pac-12. As fun as I think the Big 12 will be, at least in chunks of the conference, it's losing a region of football is pretty awful for this sport. And you talk about the warring PR messaging of Big 12 and Pac-12. Let's be clear and upfront. I'm from the West Coast. I grew up watching the West Coast. I love the West Coast. I love West Coast football. I want the future of West Coast football to be robust. I am on one side of this because of my background as a football fan. And I love football in the Southwest, the Southeast, the Midwest, the East Coast, the Northeast, whatever. I love college football wherever it exists. But let's not pretend that I'm just sort of floating above this all as some sort of unbiased, unpartisan individual. I love the Pac-12. I love Pac-10, whatever it is. So it's a bummer to me. What this means for Colorado football with Deion Sanders in the short term is probably more visibility, likely more visibility than they would have had for however long Deion is there. If he's there for the next 20 years, it'll be 20 years of ESPN and Fox visibility. What could be better for everybody?
Sure.
It's still a Big 12 that is lacking star power at the top with the loss of Texas and Oklahoma. It's sort of a steakhouse without steak. Right? Like, it's great that you have sea bass and chicken, but we came here for something else. And that doesn't exist in this moment within the Big 12. Still going to watch the hell out of the conference. I like it. I don't know where the remaining 9 teams go. I don't know what happens with San Diego State. I don't know it's never been a Boise State thing for the Pac-12 powers that be. They've never been sort of seen as a peer institution for places like Stanford and Washington and Cal and sort of the higher level academic places. So I don't know. If you play Pac-9 football, you can get away with 8 conference games and 4 non-conference games. Everybody's got to start adding games quickly for the 2024 season to play those 12 games in a championship game. But and still the upside of the teams that are left there still pretty strong given where Oregon, Washington, and Utah have been recently. Oregon State last year, obviously Washington State under Mike Leach was quite fun and quite watchable. So there are still a number of teams that are worthy of our consideration moving forward, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be a major deal with just 9, right? That it's not going to become premium inventory for TV networks. I hate that we're talking about it through that lens, but this is where we are right now. And so Colorado's only been in the conference since 2011, I believe. So they just completed their, 11th season, 12th season. But yeah, they made one conference championship game, I believe. They lost to Washington. And the Big 12 is positioning itself as a basketball conference as well, right? UConn has been rumored to be in the mix of the Big 12. Colorado as a basketball school has been, as far as I can tell, a full non-factor. They haven't made a Sweet 16 during their time, or maybe ever in the modern era. So, as much as I enjoyed Chauncey Billups' career, I guess, they just exist for inventory's sake. So that's where we are.
Well, and for stability, again, for stability's sake. Brett Yormark took over and was very aggressive in the Big 12, and I think saw a market opportunity to go out there and try and add teams and beef up the conference, knowing full well that Texas and Oklahoma were going to be leaving. Didn't want to make other teams in the Big 12 a target, as obviously some other conferences around college football, not the least of which was probably the Pac-12, looked to expand in a sense and kind of bolster its own case for existence. I want to give a shout out to some folks who are watching along live on YouTube. We've got a bunch of people who are joining. Obviously, this is pretty significant news story. Let's send a shout out to Andrew, who sends in a super chat. Thank you, sir. Doormats or not, Colorado leaving is, quite frankly, absolutely disastrous for the Pac. He doesn't even give a number, which Andrew is kind of smart.
Yep.
They have no one to blame but themselves. Hard to believe the bus will be the only ones headed out. I happen to agree. I think we agree. We had a couple questions here about, where do the other teams go now? So I think, and Brett McMurphy mentions it in his article, that, the next, I think, speculation would be on the remaining corner schools. So as we mentioned earlier, Arizona State, and Utah. I think there is a strong likelihood that if you are one of the remaining Pac-9 teams now, you're looking for exits. You're looking for options. You're looking to see how can you get out, because if it weren't already very uncertain given the state of the media rights negotiations, it is now.
Right.
It very much is now.
Yeah.
If you are Oregon and Washington, there have been rumors circulating for months on end now that at some point, not that the Big Ten was looking to be super aggressive, because they just were pretty aggressive a year ago.
Yep.
But at some point, Oregon and Washington would make sense in the Big Ten as big brands, and as the Big Ten seemingly tries to expand itself and create its own national footprint, it would make sense to give a few dance partners to USC and UCLA. Granted, pretty far ways away.
Yeah.
All right. It's a whole coast away, but that would make some sense. What about the remaining teams, Dan? What if you're a Wazoo, or what if you're an Oregon State, or a Cal or a Stanford, for that matter?
Right.
Where does this leave them?
All right. So Cal and Stanford, I don't think would go anywhere except for the Big Ten, just because they see, again, peer institution type thinking. So they would not go to the Big 12. They would not really pride themselves on being like one of, 2 of 6 teams or something left in the Pac, or let's just call it the Pacific.
The Pacific.
Sure. I like that.
Yeah.
Great miniseries, cool name for a conference. Just the Pacific. It's sort of like just Facebook. So where do those teams figure? Washington State and Oregon State, obviously, with incredible histories, great players, great coaches. Certainly, they don't have the resources. They don't have the big time results that some of the teams that have left or might be attractive to other conferences have, but would be a huge bummer. Arizona schools, obviously, there seems to be a fit with whatever the Big 12 is doing. Obviously, they've been included in the quote unquote corner schools nomenclature of,
well, especially if it turns into more of a basketball conference than Arizona.
And Arizona has that. less so for ASU, but shout out James Harden, obviously. So that's sort of where they would fall. I look, the Big Ten expanded with a different commissioner and expanded with different people at different schools in major places, right? Things have shifted around in that conference since the USC UCLA announcement has happened. There have been stories about Oregon and Washington being attractive, perhaps starting out at a lower rate, a lower payout rate than what Big Ten schools currently receive. We know where this is all eventually heading. We know where, and we've been saying this, I've been saying this, and maybe I'm right, maybe I don't know, could be totally wrong, but an ESPN division and a Fox division of the sport.
Yeah.
And, our sub-conferences,
AFC, NFC.
Whatever. AFC, NFC. That's where we are. And this is the Foxization of college football. Fox decides to start paying. They decide to start throwing their weight around. They've got a bunch of USC people running the network. They want USC, well off. So USC joins the Big Ten. I mourn whatever we fell in love with college football, but the only thing that sort of stays the same is the concept of change. And so Washington, Oregon will be fine. Stanford and Cal, I think, would rather just drop football altogether than be in some sort of sub-league. I assume Washington State and Oregon State are going to do everything they can to keep the Pacific together, but there might be some sort of rebirth of a West Coast conference with, your Boise State, San Diego State, Fresno State, Utah State, right? That they're going to be the headliners in a conference that sort of exists in the gray area between the Group of Five and Power Five, something like that. So, as best as I can tell, major West Coast college football is all but dead right now.
Some other comments here. An interesting one. Dallas Mustang watching along. An SMU alum, a bit devastated at their chances for getting into a Power Five conference. I thought the same about San Diego State. What that must feel like to potentially be that close to kind of getting your ticket into what's considered the Power Five, and then suddenly kind of the rug pulled from under you. That being said, I mean, there is a new playoff system coming. It is a little bit more inviting to Group of Five teams. However, I get it. I totally get it. If you're an SMU fan, if you're a San Diego State fan, Jake chiming in saying Oregon and Washington need to take a smaller share to join the Big Ten. I don't think Oregon is willing to. I think they'd be willing to if they were going to be left on an island, and it's either leave now or sorry.
And look, you can make up some of the money, and not a lot of the money, but some of the money doing the NFL stadium non-conference thing where you get some payout stuff. And a team like Oregon, a team like Washington that has built itself, at least in the short term, to be playoff caliber in a 12-team era. There's money there. There's opportunity potentially if you get down to like 6 teams or something, if the corner schools leave, that all of a sudden you're aligning with other conferences in a pseudo way, like Notre Dame does with the ACC, that you can make deals to, play local games, play games away, and maybe you have to sign deals that aren't super advantageous, right? Where it's like 2-for-1 deals that Oregon and Washington are going to play at Big Ten places twice for every time they're going to come west, something like that in the shorter medium term. But yeah, I imagine these schools are going to get creative about things, but there's only so many networks. So, unless these schools are happy being on Ion or
that was the rub for a long time on the Pac-12 media deal, and the Big 12, I think, rightfully went out there and renegotiated early.
Right,
renegotiated early, and as Brett McMurphy told us when we had him on our show, it did come down to a question of inventory, available inventory.
Totally.
There's only so many hours that you can fill with your network and or fill on your network. And the Pac-12 was kind of lost in that game of musical chairs because everybody else had renegotiated.
Yep.
Jake here is saying Arizona's next football emerging, established basketball. I happen to agree with Jake. I think he's a smart man. Who else do we got here? Yes, Andrew also saying the details. Colorado's getting a full Big 12 media deal, 31 and change.
Good for them.
I don't.
If you can Carl Durrell your way to $32 million, that is some Siegfried and Roy. Good job.
MC, the Pac-12 loses another large market. Oregon, Washington aren't able to carry the conference the way USC did for decades. Those schools know it, so they're going to bail if the opportunity comes. That's
Yeah.
probably, I think, where we're headed.
College football got McKinsey'd.
Look at
Field
that.
rituals. That's the long and short of it. So consulted to death for the bottom line and to lose all character, history, charm, and purpose along the way. Those are my words, not not field rituals is his words. Yeah, you're not wrong, right? We love this. We have TV networks that say we love college football. We love airing college football. We love how much our viewers love college football. Now, quick, let's change everything and see if people still like it so we can make a little bit more money because and there's a different conversation to be had about how absolutely stupid all of these networks were for creating streaming services that do nothing but lose money. And so they have to get it back. They have to get all that money back by showing the one thing that makes money, which is live sports, but also just shriveling away live sports along the way.
Yeah.
So it's real fun. Yeah, it's the world in which we live. We're going to watch college football for as long as we humanly can and get the best out of it and the most out of it for as long as possible. But I wouldn't trust these people with running anything even tiny. So we'll see what they do.
The final point here that I will mention, if we are playing this game of domino effects, if the corner schools are next, if Oregon and Washington have a lifeline to join the Big Ten, we start inching ever so closely to, I think, the final shoe to drop in all of this, which is Notre Dame. Notre Dame. If Oregon and Washington end up going to the Big Ten, Notre Dame, there was a news story that came out recently. Notre Dame was looking to triple its income when
I can't believe you're making this story about Notre Dame.
I'm not making it about Notre Dame. I think if it continues, it may end up there. If Notre Dame wants to triple its income, I think in all likelihood they're going to end up having to join a conference. And maybe the dream that I have as a longtime Notre Dame fan of them joining the Big Ten will finally come to fruition.
Well, they have to join the ACC, right?
Well, I think they want to find some way to join the Big Ten.
Well, that's good.
I think they want to find some way to join the Big Ten.
When I was 19, I wanted to find some way to spend a couple weeks with the Laker girls, but it didn't happen, Ty.
I think they will find a way if they want to.
Yeah.
I don't know how, but I think that's ultimately the goal and ultimately where they end up when this, I don't know, big wheel of conference realignment stops spinning. Let us know your thoughts. Our podcast is, of course, the Solid Verbal. If you're watching live on YouTube and are new here, go to solidverbal.com or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you are a longtime verballer, we appreciate you listening to this emergency podcast.
Yep.
Shoot us a line on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the usual hotspots, or just plain old snail email, solidverbal@gmail.com. The big news of the night, Dan, per reports, Colorado is headed back, I say, to the Big 12. We'll do our best to cover what it means moving forward.
Well, it was a better fit, right? It was always the like, Colorado's just like a better cultural fit, right? Boulder's a little bit crunchy. You got Berkeley in there, Palo Alto, Eugene. And now it's, well, the better fit is where we can make $1.3 million more dollars a year or whatever it's going to end up being. So that's where we are as a sport. Did you read, by the way, the Andy Staples thing? I might have been one of the last things he wrote for The Athletic before joining On3, where how everything should operate if it made sense. Staples, where we'd have a nationally negotiated TV deal, but there is no central college football, right? There is nothing that would ensure the balance, that it would ensure the safety of the sport, and allow all that changed. I want to say it was in 1984 when there was a ruling. I want to say Oklahoma was involved. I apologize for not having this information at my fingertips that essentially said that conferences could negotiate their own TV deals. And so now that really created all of these fiefdoms, for better or worse, but at the expense of what I believe to be the health of the sport. Hope it works out, Ty. Really hope it works out.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. We'll do our best to stay on top of this. My hunch is that there is more to follow. For myself, Ty Hildenbrandt, for that fine gentleman over there, as always, my beloved co-host, Dan Rubenstein. We'll talk to you all soon. Stay solid.
Peace.